Today we're going to be talking about hexagonal section, forging it down from square and turning it into a really simple but interesting, slightly different looking poker in this case. Steel normally comes as square or round or flat bar as stock, and so there's nothing stock about this. We're turning square bar into hexagonal bar. We're going to go from 16 mil hex to 10 mil hex to a point on the end for a poker, obviously with some nice transitions to get there each time. To do that, we're going to start with a piece of 16 mil square. Obviously, you've already got the 16 mil faces on each side, but by forging down the corners to 16 mil as well, you get a nice even hexagon. To do this, we're going to be using the forge and the power hammer. There's an awful lot of forging involved. Obviously, you're changing every single bit of this shape. So although it's a very power hammer heavy video, it's still going to be an interesting thing to watch for people that are interested in seeing all the metal move and learning about power hammer and some different dies that I'm going to use, but also using a kiss block. Now, a kiss block is really, really simple and really, really effective. Essentially, it's a piece of 16 mil or whatever size of material you want to forge down to, that you can hold between the dies of the power hammer that basically stop the power hammer squashing down any further than that distance. It allows you to get really, really nice, clean and even forging, so you can get a really nice, clean finish on each face of the hexagonal section. So I'll take you over to the power hammer. I'll show you about the dies that I'm going to use. Okay, so what we've got here are things called universal dies. So the top and the bottom match each other, obviously. This first section here is slightly radiused. That allows you to draw material out really, really quickly and effectively. The next section here is just flat and parallel with both sides. They're on the same height, basically. The center line of this radius here is at exactly the same height to this square here. I'm going to be coming here, obviously this block of wood's not going to be in the way, and I'm going to be hitting the corners of each of the bits of 16 mil, but I'm going to be using my kiss block to make sure that I don't get any further than 16 mil. And I'm just going to aim for a short section, maybe 100, 120 mil long. I'm going to ignore this bit for now, and it doesn't matter if I get that slightly longer, because this transition here is going to be then forged under these curved sections. Right, it's a hot day today, so it's the morning, it's going to be a bit cooler, so I want to get on with it. I'm going to light the forge, and then I'm going to get some steel heated, and then we'll show you the power hammer. As I say, this is a very power hammer heavy video, so I'm not going to show you all about how to light a forge. I'm assuming if you've got one of these, you already know how to light a forge. See if you can spot the thing that I do next that's going to get all of the comments. Good luck. Right, I'll stop you there. You're about to write a comment. This is how I light my forge. I use a gas torch instead of wood and paper because I don't have a ready supply of wood and paper. I do have a ready supply of a gas torch. Now, also, before you do a comment, I appreciate that this is a cutting nozzle and not a heating nozzle. Cutting nozzles work exactly the same as a heating nozzle, except the fact that I've got this lever here that basically turns the heating nozzle aspect of this into an oxidizing flame. Whereas if I just light it and use control of both the oxygen and the propane, I can just get a heating nozzle out of it. And also the heat that I use is a lot smaller than a heating nozzle itself, those things that look like a flower head, okay? So don't write in your comments now because I've just explained it, all right?
So just something to note for you here, I'm using the coke forge instead of the gas forge, which you can see to the left of the power hammer.
See how quick that was?
This is a one-off video, a one-off product. Normally if I was making many of the same thing, I would use the gas forge, because it allows me to keep an even heat on lots of different things at the same time without scaling up too much. But for the purposes of this video, I think we'll use the coke forge. Plus it looks a bit nicer. It can get turned off every so often so that I can talk to the camera, that sort of thing. So it just works a bit nicer for these things.
Right, forge is on. I've just turned it off because it's really noisy and you won't be able to hear anything. That's all ready to go. I'm going to get the bit of 16mm steel and I'll take you over to the power hammer to see the first bit, the handle bit, being forged down to 16mm hex.
So you can see the kiss block here. It's a piece of tool steel which is harder than mild steel, which means it won't squash as easily and compress. It takes a bit of getting used to. You need a free hand to use it, and you've got to get the balance of the thing right in the power hammer, because you don't want it kicking around all over the place. But as you can see, it's quite useful. It allows you to move a lot of steel without worrying at all about forging down further than you need, and gives you a really nice, even and consistent surface to the parts that you're forging. Obviously it only works with parallel sides. Tapers, you would need something like a flatter or something with an angle on the top so you can change the angle. But this gives you a good idea as to how easy it is to use to get the thickness that you want.
Okay, so now I've got a nice hexagonal section on the end. So as I say, it's sort of 150 maybe long. I'm going to flip ends, so I'm going to start holding it from this end now with the tongs, and I'm going to come in here on the slightly radiused dies to just get that transition in. I'm going from 16 down to 10. And once I make that transition down to 10, I can then just forge the rest of it out really roughly to get all of that material spread. Eventually, this is going to get a lot longer. So the next thing you'll see is me getting that transition down from 16mm to 10mm.
So I'm using a 10mm kiss block here. It's a bit of 10mm by 30 or 40, I think. It's quite a big chunky bit. Probably not suitable massively for the long term. But you can really see how the drawing, the radius part of the power hammer can really draw out the material. I'm hitting it quite hard and moving an awful lot of material. But at no point going any thinner than the 10mm from the kiss block. It's noisy, you can hear it chiming and rattling as I get down into the to the thickness of 10mm, which is a great sign that you're in the right area. Obviously you can also feel it through your hand as you're holding this block. And then just taking a bit of the corner out to help me further along in the process.
So what I've got now is a very roughed out 10mm square. It's really important at this stage to keep it straight the next time you stick it in the fire. My general rule is to make sure everything's straight before it goes back in the fire. That just sort of alleviates any sort of wandering that you might do later down the line. The tricky thing with this bit is to make sure that you're still eyeing the flat spots of each facet so that it doesn't end up twisted along its length. Now, this is going to end up a bit too long. This started as a 300mm piece of 16 square. So what I'll do is I'm just going to cut off maybe 80, sort of 60 to 80mm of the ends, and then I can note that down to make sure that next time I cut one, I'll cut it accordingly so that I don't get this wastage at the end. This is not going to be needed, and it's just going to flap around and cause everything to be a bit more problematic. So I'll chop that off, I'll get it back in the forge. I'm going to clean that square up even more with the flat sections of the dies, and then I'm going to come in and start putting the hexagonal section in. So again, it's just like from square to hex, that's what your process is.
One thing I don't think gets talked about enough with blacksmithing is the different types of heat. As you can see, this has just come out of the forge. The majority of the section that I'm working is quite hot still. Obviously it's hard to pick up on some of the camera shots. This is what we would call a working heat. It's very good for moving a lot of material. But what I'm conscious and keen to do is to allow it to cool as it works, and eventually it gets down to the point where it will become a planishing heat. And that planishing heat is really crucial for forging like this because it allows me to improve the surface of the steel. It gets a lot shinier, it gets a lot smoother. Not enough people do enough planishing, I don't think. And it's really easy as well with a kiss block, but you'll often see it on things like tapers or points and pokers, where you can hit the steel repeatedly at a very low heat. As you can see, like here, it's starting to get almost no colour in it whatsoever. But the forging that you end up with is very, very crisp and very, very clean and very, very shiny. And because a lot of the purpose of the hex section is to have that really clean, nice, crisp finish, it's really important to be able to work it at this planishing heat, which you'll see quite a lot during the rest of the forging.
So what we have now is a nice long section of 10mm hex, which I'm sure you can see. So that planishing heat that I talked about, when it's at a low heat, is going to really add to your surface texture and make each of those facets really sort of shine and pop really smooth. The only thing that I've noticed is this part of this transition. I've eyeballed that to get from 16 to 10 initially, and I've perhaps been a little bit too I haven't quite forged it down enough to meet that 10. So I want to dress that up now with the radius dies again. I would much prefer it that way than too much, because you'll get a divot in there that you'll never be able to get out, and it really sort of catches the eye. You could, of course, have a fixed 10mm kiss block in the power hammer itself. That way, I could free up my other hand to hold a kiss block. Obviously, I haven't got one here. This is a kind of one-off, but that would be your best way to do that transition, to go from 16 to 10, or whatever sections you're going to and from. And that way, you know that you can't squeeze that down more than 10mm, and it'll always be a nice transition. In any case, you're probably going to want to come back once you've drawn this out, just to tidy up that transition and get it as clean and crisp as the rest of it. So that's what I'll do now.
So, as well as another example of using a planishing heat, as this starts to cool as I'm working it, what you can start to see is really the sensitivity of the power hammer. It can be incredibly powerful, but it can also be incredibly delicate. And it's so sensitive that I can control it with my foot to forge sections like this and use even a high heat and not push much material around. I'm much more interested in refining the surface, and the sensitivity of the power hammer is one of the things that allows me to do that. So it's not all just bang, 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 although it is a bit sometimes bang, bang, bang.
So that's basically it done, except for the point on the end. We've got the 16 down to the 10. There's a nice transition there. You see how sensitive that power hammer can be. Just forged that down nicely, kept all of the facets and the faces in line. I'm going to keep it to that sort of length. I'm not quite sure what it is. It looks slightly over 500mm long to me. I'm now going to put in a point on the end in exactly the same way as I did this, only it's going from 10 to maybe 2 or so mil at the very point. That's obviously going to stretch it out a little bit longer. I'm not going to use any kiss blocks this time. I'm going to do that by eye, and I will then use a flatter after I've done the drawing out to just reinforce those faces on each side and get it really nice and crisp. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to wait till it cools down, because it's getting a bit long and these tongs are kind of unnecessary once it's cold. So I'll let it cool. I'll get a heat on the end and I'll show you the point on the end of it.
So this is a flatter, as I mentioned. It's got an angled top and a flat bottom. It's kind of clues it in its name, really. It does what it needs to do by allowing you to control the angle. It basically turns your two parallel dies into a very sort of organic flat surface that you can kind of hold at almost any angle. And again, it's just about improving the surface and planishing and making sure that the taper is nice and straight and even, and just refining each one of those hexagonal surfaces. Here I just wanted to make sure that the very tip follows with all of the hexagonal lines as they converge at the very point. Obviously it's delicate work and it's possibly slightly too delicate for the power hammer, just because of the area that you're working is so small. So I often like to finish points off like this with a hand hammer, and again, planishing heat, getting a nice surface to it.
So there is your finished poker with a hexagonal section running all the way down with some transitions between sizes. So once it's cool, you can then finish it. Some options are that you could just wire brush this an awful lot with a big wire brush, butcher's block, or a smaller one. The other option, because the facets are so clean and crisp, another option is to just use Scotch-Brite, which is probably the best invention in the whole world, and that will really just smooth everything off, pick out a lot of the highlighted ends for you to then finish with whatever. I'm going to use beeswax on this one. The alternative is that you use a cut brush, which is like a spinny roundy wire brush thing on a hand grinder. That will make it very shiny and very bright. The trouble with that is that it will take off a lot of the definition from the very crisp edges, and I want those to really stand out. So I'm going to finish it in Scotch-Brite now, which you'll see, and then just give it a quick coating in a beeswax when it's been heated. Right, so that, as you can see, wasn't an awful lot I needed to do to get a nice shine on that. It's the beauty of forging something so heavily and doing a lot of that planishing and the power hammer, because you end up with really nice and clean surfaces, really crisp surfaces, and it doesn't take a lot to then get them to start shining quite nicely. So really, you don't need to do much more than that. And then, as I say, I'll just get this nice and warm. This middle bit's quite warm anyway, and then just get a bit of beeswax on it. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you now know everything there is to know about forging hex section, planishing, and all sorts of power hammer control. It's been a fun video to make. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments section. I'll be happy to help if I can. Obviously, if you've got any criticisms, I'm sure you'll leave them as well. Bye.